Welcome back to the War Thunder Academy. Last time we went over how to dodge every single missile in-game, or so I thought. But as it turns out, there's another kind of fox too that is definitely worth going over. We've already talked about how to dodge all the normal IR missiles in-game, but what we didn't talk about were IRCCMs. And these are basically IR, but with more tech that makes them harder to flare. Now, there are two main types of IRCCMs. You have tracking suspension, which is currently only used by the AIM-9M, and you have flare gate width, which is what every other IRCCM in the game uses. Here's why they're different. Tracking suspension works by detecting when the target has fired a flare, and when it sees that, it will turn off its seeker head for a moment and use inertial guidance to go to the target's last known path. After a moment, the seeker head will turn back on, and the idea is by then, the flare will be out of the way and it will be able to reacquire its lock on the original target. So that's what the AIM-9M uses, and as for everything else, they use flare gate width. This means that the seeker head's field of view is really small. It's almost like it has a super zoomed in view of the target, to the point that it won't actually see the flares coming out. The thing is, the seeker head sees in this kind of cone shape, so the further it is from the target, the more it's able to see, and the easier it's gonna be to flare. As a rule of thumb, we'll say around 2 kilometers away is when these guys really start to become dangerous. Now, while these are definitely harder to dodge than a normal IR, you can still dodge them both in all three aspects: front, rear, and side. We're gonna look at these in order from least to most difficult to pull off, starting with the front aspect. This is actually incredibly easy to do against both tracking suspension and gate width. Simply fly towards the seeker and pop a couple of flares while maneuvering a bit, and that's really it for that. These things do not track well at all in the front aspect, so you shouldn't have much problem with that. Rear aspect is definitely a bit tougher though, but once again, the way you dodge both types is pretty much the same. The idea is you want to fire some flares and put them between your plane and the seeker. It's almost like you're building a little wall of heat signatures that you can hide behind. Now, the main thing to think about for this is where the flares come out of your plane. Some planes fire them up, some fire down, some back, and that's something you'll need to think about when considering how to maneuver to put the flares between you and the seeker. For instance, if your flares fire down, I find it best to push the nose down like this to get the flares where I want them. Now, so far things have been pretty similar for both types of IRCCMs, but the side aspect is where that all changes. If you can, I suggest avoiding this scenario if at all possible, mostly because it's going to require a lot more flares than the front and rear aspect. But sometimes that just can't happen, and then you'll need to know how to do this. We're going to start with the flare gate width ones since they're a little easier to explain. Like I said earlier, the closer these guys get, the harder it is to flare them off. So the trick to dodging them in a side aspect is to notice them early, then start flaring and pull up or down. But once they get within about 2 kilometers, you're gonna have a really hard time flaring them off. All you can really do at that point is spam flares and pray to whatever god you believe in. As for the tracking suspension guys, it's sort of the opposite. Now, the order in which you do the following steps is very important, so listen closely. First, you'll want to be as directly side on with the seeker as possible. Then, wait until it's no more than about 2.5 kilometers away and no less than about 1.5 kilometers. Then you're gonna dump a bunch of flares, and this part is important. A second or two after you start dumping flares, pull either up or down. Now what this does is force the missile to turn off its seeker and track with inertial guidance. And that's the reason we have to wait a second after firing our flares. We're just ensuring that that happens. Then once the seeker is off, you start to pull away. And by the time it opens its eyes again, you aren't gonna be where it thinks you should be, and it will likely go for the flares instead. This can be tricky to pull off at first and does require a little bit of practice, but it's very consistent if you can get the hang of it. It's just definitely a lot more difficult than the front or rear aspect. Now, there's one more method that can be used against both types of IRCCMs, and that is pre-flaring. In other words, starting to flare before they fire at you. This is a good way to distract the seeker from the very start. So if you find yourself in a position where you're worried someone may send a heat seeker your way, it may be best to start putting out a couple flares. Lastly, there's one more thing that I failed to mention in the first video, and that's multipathing. This is something you can use against all of the radar-guided missiles in-game, and we could talk all day about how it works and why it happens, but really all you need to know is that if you fly super close to the ground, you can confuse the radar and cause it to hit the ground instead of your jet. You do have to be really close to the ground though. It's a very fine margin. And it doesn't always work, but if you combine this method with something like a notch, you can basically be untouchable by radar for a moment. So now for making it this far in the video, you get to know the secret word of the day. And we're doing something new here. Instead of just giving you guys a bogus word, I'll also be providing a bogus definition. Your homework will be to go to the comments down below and use it in a sentence. So, today's secret word of the day is fabloosh, which is a sticky and slightly radioactive substance commonly found within the folds of Dan Schneider's chin. So, go use that in a sentence down below. A special thanks to the Toad and Big Mike for helping get the footage for this video. I love you all, and I'll see you soon.